Do you think that for where we are right now, I think the only place that we fit within DEI was just on the diversity side. I don't know if I ever really saw the equity or inclusion per se.
Right.
I, and I could be wrong, Neil, but I'm just saying I know we're diverse, so when we show up, you can't help but recognize that there's some black people in the mix. If we're just being honest, the equity and inclusion part always seem to be question marks, and I think that it seems like um, perhaps they've had to figure out ways, or just with the conversation with this whole outsourcing of jobs and Southeast Asians being kind of pulled into the conversation, at least from my vantage point.
Hmm.
There was a question of where Americans stood, and by Americans, it seemed like we were talking about white America. Uh,
Hmm.
you know, do you think that that was the case at all, or what I'm saying that you know, do you think that that was becoming more of a thing or a question that America needed to address for itself, as opposed to DEI as all of us traditionally thought of it?
It's a good question, Jose. I think a big part of it is that in the American geopolitical interest, America is always having to, internally at least, having to reflect that its policies at least address concerns on the international scene. And so, for example, in dealing with Asia, it has to make sure that at home, if it's preaching a certain doctrine in Asia, it also makes sure that Asians in America are not being discriminated against, if you will. But I think a part of the problem is ultimately, again, it goes back to our own internal organization, right? One of the things that I was having a conversation this morning with my business partner, and we're talking about this idea of the whole being greater than some of the parts. And we often throw that axiom out there, or that adage, and an essential criteria, though, for the whole to be greater than the sum of the parts is that it has to be organized in a particular way, right? It has to have a particular pattern of organization. The parts have to relate to each other in a particular way, and they have to interact with themselves in a particular way. And because we don't do that, evident by the outcome, that when we look at for example, the buying power of Black America, the buying power would be an example of the sum of the parts, right? If you total up all the buying power of all the individual Black entities and households in America, you get this buying power number that folks often quote. Well, that doesn't necessarily equate to the wealth of Black America, or because the wealth is not equivalent or greater than that dollar amount, that value, because we're not relating to each other in a way that would amplify the individual contributions to make it greater as a whole. And so those communities that have been involved in this DEI conversation are there for various political reasons. But who gets the lion's share of this DEI effort is my concern. And the lion's share, the benefit of that, comes from the degree to which those communities are prepared to exploit the resources when they become available. And this comes back to really a training issue that I'm sure that we'll probably get to in a second, which is how have we been prepared as a community to exploit those opportunities when we had them, and now they're taken away. And imagine that after this presidency, something else will come along. And if we don't deal effectively with this training preparation issue, I think we're going to have similar kind of outcomes and see history repeat itself.